Welcome to the Hoops and Huddle podcast. I am Malika, and today I am joined by Justin Paden and Dime Dropper. We will be reviewing the top point guards all time. Today's episode includes Dime Dropper because he is literally, I believe you're on the 70s now in your dime machine, right? So I love his knowledge and history of the game. I think it's perfect to kick off this project by having Dime Dropper join us to talk about the 60s and 70s top point guards all time for this particular. We know in NBA eras, sometimes eras are just a decade, but we are combining them for this exercise. We're doing 60s and 70s tonight. We're going to do 80s and 90s for the next episode, and then we're going to do 2000 and the 2010. And then we're going to do all time. And so that is the order. The fact that you're listening to this or viewing this means you can watch the next one, then the next one, and then the next one, because we're dropped them at once. So I'm going to let Justin and Dime introduce themselves, and then we'll get started talking about, we're going to start off with, basically, before I go there, we're going to do tiers 1 through 4, and we're going to list out tiers, starting off with tier 4. So go ahead, Justin and Dime, introduce yourselves, and then we'll get started.
What up, everybody? This is JP. That's my second appearance on the Hoops and Huddle podcast. I am grateful because I really enjoy this podcast. I'm a huge fan of it. So I'm just honored and grateful to be on here. And also I'm ready to talk history because I love history. So
Dime.
My name is, people call me Dime Dropper in hoop circles. This is actually the first Hoops and Huddle since I met Malika in real life, so that's awesome. Second appearance overall. The last time she had me on was to talk about the Clippers, since I'm a Clipper fan, LA sports content creator. So you can find me on YouTube, Dime Dropper, my podcast, Dime Dropper. It's almost all LA sports, LA basketball during the season, but I will talk about other teams, and in the playoffs, I talk about every team. And the way Malika and Justin and I have really come together is through our shared love of the history of the game. And the Dime Machine she mentioned in the beginning of the show is my process of trying to learn everything I can about the history of the game and doing it in a way where I start from Bill Russell's rookie season and go all the way down. It takes a long time with all the work I put in. I try to watch every game, try to get, newspaper clippings, all this kind of stuff. And right now I'm in the 1971-72 season. So my knowledge is still a little limited at the last 8 years of the decade, but I think it'll be enough for this. And if you want to follow me on that journey, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, at Dime Dropper Pod, find me.
Cool. Thank you guys for introducing yourselves. We're going to start off with tier 4. Again, we're combining the 60s and 70s. And for tier 4 players, my 4 are Nate Archibald, Dave Bing, Gail Goodrich, and JoJo White. Those are my tier 4, and it took me all day just to get down to this list. I removed Hal Greer because he's kind of hard. I'm curious. Why don't you guys say yours, and then we'll have a discussion on our choices.
You go first, Justin.
Yeah, so this one was very difficult. You just mentioned JoJo White and who was the other one? Gail Goodrich. Yeah. So this one was really tough. So I included ABA people because ABA was right there during that time with the NBA. So I have Dave Bing, I have Nate Archibald, I have Matt Calvin, and then my last one I have is Jimmy Jones.
Ooh, these are good names, dude. These are good names. Jimmy Jones and Matt Calvin are great. I
had Matt on my list. I did have the Matt on. I just removed him, I think. I had him on my list, but hey, that's a good list.
I appreciate it.
Man, I totally forgot we were doing ABA last minute when I made my although it would have been hard for me to even though I was very happy with the names you had, Jimmy Jones and Matt Calvin, I would have to actually kind of sit down and think, do they replace the guys on my list? But Malika, We had a couple of common ones, and I think with Justin as well. So we all mentioned JoJo White in tier 4.
I did. Yeah, I think we did.
Justin didn't have him, right?
Didn't have JoJo White though, but that was a good name to bring up. So
JoJo White is in there for me. Dave Bing, I know Malika mentioned him. Did you mention him too, Justin?
Oh yes, Dave Bing, yes.
So we all have Dave Bing in tier 4. So I have Dave Bing, JoJo White. The other two guys I went with were Lenny Wilkens, one of them, and Norm Van Leer.
Ooh.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
I was thinking NBA. I could have thought about Freddie Lewis, Jimmy Jones, and Matt Calvin, but I went with Norm Van Leer, honestly. I was thinking about Calvin Murphy. But I know a little bit
I
more
was going through, Calvin
Murphy.
Looked at the highlights to him. Yeah.
I went with Norm Van Leer. So my tier 4 is Norm Van Leer, Lenny Wilkens, JoJo White, and Dave Bing.
Hey, good name on No Van Leer, because a lot of people really sleep on No Van Leer. So great job on that.
Yeah, this is interesting. I feel like we each have different lists. I thought we were going to have more common, and it wouldn't be as hard to get down to, because a part of me is thinking we should agree on the 4 before we move on to the 3. We have very diverse lists. Mm-hmm. Funny thing is, I do want Nate Archibald on this list. I think he belongs in the top 10 of this era.
Oh, he's in my list.
Yeah. Yes.
So actually, let's go to tier 3, because I think we're so diverse. We may
have overlapping.
We're overlapping. We may have. I have an idea of how we're going to do that. Maybe. Yeah. But anyway, let's go to tier 3. I'm gonna give you my tier 3. My tier 3 is Lenny Wilkens, Casey Jones, and Matt Calvin.
Ooh, so you got Matt Calvin in there.
You got Matt Calvin in there, okay.
I have him in there. I just have him on tier 3. I don't know. When I look him up, I was like, he looks like he belongs in 3. So those are my 3. You guys go.
My tier 3, I do have Lenny Wilkens in my tier 3. Bob Cousy, even though he retired in 63, but he's still. We'll discuss about Bob Cousy, but I got him on my tier 3, and then my last one I have is Louis Dampier. I hopefully I pronounced it right. Dampier. I think I pronounced it.
Man, see, so this is the tricky part, right? With I wanted to mention this. It's very important. I mentioned this for a show about point guards in the 60s and 70s. One thing I've learned about studying this era is the differentiation between a point guard and a shooting guard. Like that wasn't it was just guards.
Yeah.
You saw a lot of combo guards. You saw a lot of guys that would be like a point guard's height playing shooting guard, like smaller backcourts. So there's guys that were saying they're point guards based on their play style. Like clearly Lenny Wilkens is a traditional point guard. Bob Cousy is a traditional point guard. But for example, I don't have Earl Monroe on my list only because we kind of came to like a pre-production agreement that he comes of as more of a 2 when he was traded to New York. So Earl Monroe would 100% be on my list just for anyone. Earl Monroe fan.
He was on mine, bluntly. He was on mine. Yes, because of what I said about Magic, I took him off.
Right. I look at Gail Goodrich as somebody and Louis Dampier as guys that are thought of as more score-first guards. So I didn't have Gail Goodrich or Louis Dampier on my list because Louis Dampier and Gail Goodrich are like the best shooters, that I've heard of.
That's a good point. That's an argument for when we consolidate.
Right. So here's my tier 3. I went with Tiny Archibald. So I guess we had Lenny Wilkens and Tiny switched for some of ours. And then I went with Hal Greer because he was the only player besides Oscar and Jerry, if I'm not mistaken, to be an all-star every single season from 1961 all the way to 1970. His longevity is incredible. And I think he was the leading scorer on a championship team in the playoffs with Philly.
We're doing shooting guards next.
And then, so that's my 3. And then Bob Cousy. So Cousy, Hal Greer, were my 3.
Yes, Dom. We agree on Bob Cousy. Yes.
Okay, Justin. Did I miss? Am I crazy? Did you do yours?
Yes, I did mine. I said Lenny Wilkens, Bob Cousy, and Louis Dampier.
You did. That was just my blanking for a second because y'all said Bob Cousy, and you'll see why. I need help with tier 2. I think you guys may have just helped me with tier 2. Because I have Bob Cousy on tier 2. Look at his career, and I know that he retired in 63, and that was the hard part. It was like, this is not the 50s. This is the 60s. Through the 70s, and he was one of the greatest point guards. It felt wrong not to have him anywhere in here, even though he retired early. I was like, well, it's different than Magic, because Magic only played a half a season in 70. He played 79, but only through December 31st, and then he really is an 80s player, right? Mm-hmm. Cousy was a 50s player, but he extended to 63. So I do have Cousy here, but maybe because he only played 3 years, he really is tier 3. And I'm fine with that, which means I can keep Jerry West and Walt Frazier in this tier.
Yeah, I was gonna say even if you have Bob Cousy fully healthy, I don't think he reaches the top 2 tiers. If we're picking top 3 players, I don't think he fits in there.
Personally. Actually, I think I'm good with Jerry West and Walt Frazier and as my tier 2. And this one was harder. I just for tier 2 I kept going back and forth, but some Walt Frazier for tier 2. And go ahead, Justin.
So Bob Cousy was in my tier 2, but then I had to think about just the accolades and stats just lining up, and I'm like, okay, is Bob Cousy better than Jerry West and Walt Frazier in the decade of the 60s, even though Bob Cousy retired in 63? And I'm like, not really, so we'll get to tier 1 because that's going to be debatable with them 2 players. But my tier 2, I have Jerry West and Walt Frazier too as well.
Okay, cool. Dime, I'm curious what Dime's going to say.
Yeah, so I had to mention it that I was going to give you guys a hard time for the one player on tier 2. Jerry West and Oscar Robertson are intertwined, linked. They came in the league the same year, they exited the same year, and they're just I literally go back and forth about who's better between those 2. So
Jerry West told you who's better between those 2, though.
Yeah.
Jerry West is a very modest guy. I got Clyde Frazier, obviously, in tier 2, my favorite player of all the ones we've mentioned. And we all agree on that one. Mm-hmm. Then I'm going to have to be the guy that goes against the grain here. I got to ride with my LA dog. Jerry West is my Oscar on my tier 2. And yes, I'm giving that. I guess I gave it away. Jerry West is my number 1.
Okay. We're at tier 2. So you have Oscar Robertson at tier 2. I mean, to me, there's no wrong answer in this part. When we consolidate, is the part that me and Justin to probably consolidate, but take your arguments into consideration. I'm thinking, but yeah, I like. Okay, so tier 1. My tier 1 is Oscar Robertson. I think in this era. I think he was the greatest, I think he's a guard. He was a point guard that I think would translate extremely well to today. His skill level was unheard of at the time. You know what I mean? Which is why Jerry West talks so fondly about him, because what he was able to do on the floor was just amazing to him. And he was difficult to play with because he demanded so much from his team and from his so people talk about Jordan. I was like, the things I hear about Oscar Robertson, he was something else. I don't know if players from the 80s that are whining about Jordan all the damn time will be able to play with Oscar Robertson, from what I'm hearing. But I wish we had more film.
Yes.
Him. I did find, Chris sent me some film a while back on Oscar Robertson. And when I look at his skill level and what he was able to do, and I guess when Oscar came around, they had to go back and go, redo some of his stats to get, because he was a triple-double king. And if they were counting them the way they should have been, I don't think it would have took longer for Russ to reach him. So yeah, Oscar Robertson, number one for me, because I think in this era, he was, to me, he was that dude.
I have Oscar number one too as well. Like you just said, like his versatile skill set was unbelievable. Guy averaged a triple double in the season, second all time in triple doubles with 181. One of the best post up guards of all time, way ahead of his time. Not just Jerry West saying that Oscar was the best player at that time.
He even wrote about it in his book. He wrote about Oscar in his book.
Yes, and he also said it on the NBA 75th draft, or maybe Isaiah said it, that he was on the panel with Jerry West, and Jerry West said there was no better person than Oscar Robertson. So it's not just Jerry West. Bill Russell said it, Wilt Chamberlain said it, John Havlicek and Elgin Baylor said that Oscar was the best player from that 60s and that he's 12th all time in win shares. If you include both the NBA and ABA in terms of win shares, he is 12th all time with 189.2.
That's a convincing. What do you have to? I mean, and Dime, in terms of number one for Jerry West, what is your argument, I guess you could say?
Well, before I go, I just want to say that if we're just talking the role of a point guard and like a distributor, I think Oscar would have been my number one. But since we're just talking like players that play the point guard, I did go with Jerry West. I really don't know if I think Jerry West is better. It's so marginal, but I can surely make the case for it. And I think Jerry West, when you talk about guys that could translate into any era, I think Jerry West is right there with anyone. He was at this time the best shooter ever. Like at this time, 1970 or whatever, 75, he's the best shooter of all time. His pull up going to his right, not to say Oscar's isn't amazing, but he's got the best pull up going right I think I maybe have ever seen in my life. Now granted, I didn't see Jordan, but he's got the elevation of a Kobe Bryant and the quick release of a Steph Curry in one. And
I know the era. They in this era particularly, they were mainly guards, but I am going to be splitting the shooting guard. So we're talking in this era, I want to be clear, in this era we're
talking
guards that were really operating as point guards.
Well, okay, I have an argument there as well. I mean, in 1971, when they got Gail Goodrich back. By the way, on his Basketball Reference, he's listed at point guard majority of his career. And I guess, as I said, there's no differentiation back then, but I see Jerry West bringing the ball up a lot, even more than like a Steph Curry does now. So like when people say Steph's a point guard, and if I get he's probably going to be on your guys' list when we get to the 2010s, then I think Jerry West absolutely fits the criteria as well. And Jerry West in 1971, when Gail came back, he averaged 9.5 assists a game. So Jerry showed everyone that even though he's not the passer that Oscar is, no way, but he can still be a facilitator and a lead facilitator on a championship team. And 1972, at 33 years old, he averaged 26 points and 10 assists if you round up. 9.7, that was league leading. So Jerry West could show you could do both. And one of my big edges for him is Oscar's a very solid defender, but Jerry West's all-time great defender as a guard. He gets so many steals, amazing in the passing lanes. He was all defense every single year he played. He's got that never say die attitude. And I think people give him a lot of, crap because he lost in the finals so many times, but it's like what the LeBron fans say. It's like, is it worse to not make it at all? Because he did make it to the finals a ton, and losing to an all-time great team in Boston shouldn't be as frowned upon as it is. And if you look at his numbers in those series, they're rarely that he underperformed. He was fantastic. And the way he carried teams at times. Yes?
Really used one of the LeBron arguments?
Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, I have to make my case with him. But the thing is, he wasn't really a favorite in almost all those series until he got Wilt Chamberlain. And I'll just give a last to end it off on this, just to prove my example of carrying teams. Jerry never, at least in his first 12 years, he never missed the playoffs. I don't know what those, I know the first 13 years he didn't miss the playoffs. I don't know what happened in 74 yet, but he in 65, Elgin Baylor was out. He had no other star on his team, really. And this man averaged 46 points in the conference finals, or at that time it was known as the division finals, against the Bullets that had Walt Bellamy, Gus Johnson, Don Olin, Bailey Howell, and knocked them off in 6 games because he averaged 46 points for the series, which is still a record to this day in the NBA for an individual series in PPG. So that's my argument for Jay West. But of course, I'm splitting hairs with Oscar and him.
That's convincing and everything. I know Jerry West at one point was leading the league in assists too as well. Oscar led the league in assists 6 times. So he was not only just a scorer, but he was also a really good passer, and he happens to be a really good rebounder too as well. Jerry West was awesome. I mean,
he was incredible. There's no doubt that he was.
I mean, you can make an argument for Jerry to be tier 1. You can make an argument for Oscar being tier 1. I mean, it's like Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain, which we'll get into the centers. It's like you can pick either center pretty much because nobody ain't going to argue with you about who was the best, center. The same thing with Oscar and Jay. Nobody ain't going to argue who was the best point guard of the 60s. So
if you want to, start out like the shared list, the consolidated list, I'm much more willing to agree to Oscar being 1 than, I'm not going to push back. You know what I'm saying? We can take him and if we're talking passers at the point guard position, we're talking about point guard. So like more in the traditional sense, Oscar Robertson for sure, number 1.
Okay, so that one is consolidated. Now tier 2, I think 3 and 4 are going to be a little harder. Maybe not, but tier 2, Jerry West and Walt Frazier.
Yes, no doubt.
And then tier 3, the funny thing is I kept going back and forth from Willie Wilkins. I had him at one point in 4, then I put him at 3, and I just kept wavering. I'm not married to. Did either of you have Casey Jones on your list?
No, as much as I love Casey, I went with only players that had made the All-Star team a couple of times, or at least once.
I don't take the All-Star game seriously as an accolade.
I was looking at him and stuff, and he 37.8 win shares, 7.7 points per game, 4.5 assists per game, 3.6 rebounds per game, 7-time NBA champion. Like, it's impressive and all, but there was some other players to me that was more impressive than KC, but KC was still a great player for those championship Boston Celtics teams.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I'm not married. Go ahead, Don. I'm sorry.
I was going to say he's one of the best perimeter defenders.
Yes.
For sure. But I still think he's a role player, and all the guys I picked were real bona fide stars.
Yeah.
On my list.
I'm not married to removing Casey Jones, for the consolidation purposes. I'm not married to taking him off my list. I think when we do post this, our list to Hoop Spaces eventually when that site comes up, he's going to be on my tier, for this. But for the consolidated list, I have no issues with him taking him off my list. So that should help with consolidation some. How many of us have Lenny Wilkins in tier 3?
I do.
Dime does not have him in tier 3. I think you have him in tier 4.
Yeah.
And you appear to really want him in tier 4 by your response.
Oh, no, I don't care. I do think so. None of you guys had Hal Greer on your list?
I did have Hal Greer, but for some reason I took him off. And what I was doing is I was looking people up, and if I saw shooting guard was first, then I took them. Yeah, that's why he was taken off, because we're going to redo the shooting guard. In order to have a top point guards all time, they need to be either a point guard for our purposes or a shooting guard.
The people that have both, how do you decide for the people that have both listed, like JOK or Jerry or Hal?
At least I think that if they were primarily a point guard, that would be first.
Gotcha. Yeah, Hal Grill, I didn't really have because I had him more of a shooting guard than a point
Same.
guard for me.
Yeah.
But like he's gonna be on the list when we do the shooting guards for sure. But yeah, he's more shooting guard than me. It's
Jerry
like
West is going
overall,
to be on there as well. He's going to come up again, but
yeah,
we'll deal with that when we get there. But
yeah.
It's definitely hard because Hal Greer played it with Larry Costello and Wally Jones, who are both also like point guard molds. Like that's why I said there's no differentiation in this era. So like a lot of times it's like two point guards are playing together. You know what I mean? Essentially.
you're bringing up a good argument.
Yeah.
Like in terms of when we do, um, but if we were to do just guard, that would make the list even
Tougher.
all guards
Tougher.
tougher to create, like a top 10 in guards.
Well, we can take Hal Greer off then if you guys have him. If you guys have him reserved for the shooting guard list, then
Yeah, I think he's going to come up for the shooting guards.
Yeah, for sure.
I already
So-
started my shooting guards list, and he's on it.
Yeah.
Jerry West is on that one too, which is why that one's going to But okay, so Hal Greer, so he's taken up. But who do you have? Where do you have Matt Calvin?
Matt Calvin is in my tier 4.
Okay,
I didn't have Matt Calvin, but I'm so down to add him.
I'm not against putting Matt Calvin in tier 4. I'm not against that at all. I'm not married to that, so we can have Matt Calvin in tier 4. Let me just. I'm not against that at all. So I'm just gonna on my end. I'm just gonna. So Matt Calvin tier 4. Okay, and okay. So Lenny. So we're gonna. So I'm moving Casey Jones. Let me just. So tier 3. Let's hear you guys tier 3 again. Because we need to lock down tier 3.
Lenny Wilkins, Bob Cousy, Louis Dampier for my tier 3.
Oh, Bob Cousy. That's who I'm missing.
I put Kuz, Hal Greer, and Tiny, but since we're taking Hal off, it would just be Bob Cousy and Tiny.
Bob Cousy, Tiny. Okay. Okay. So we have Bob Cousy, Tiny, and Lenny Wilkins right now is in tier 4. Right now we only have Bob Cousy and Tiny Archibald in tier 3. So let's look at tier 4 and
Okay.
come back to tier 3 and get the final person. So tier 4, consolidation right now, we have Matt Calvin in tier 4. Do we agree on JoJo White in tier 4?
1000%.
Uh,
Oh well, I mean, just being on the list. I mean, he might.
yeah,
be
just
that-
being on the list for sure. He's tier 4. Like I said, I didn't really include him on my list. I mean, that's a great name to pick up, and he was a great Boston Celtic too, with Dave Cowens and all them. So,
You know what? Let's hear your arguments for your list, because you had a different list than I was. I wasn't expecting some of the names you had in your list. So, what is your argument for the names? For Dave Bing, do we have Dave Bing in tier 4?
1000%, he's on tier 4.
Hell yeah.
Okay, so we have Matt Calvin and Dave Bing in tier 4. This is the other two. We have 3 spots, 1 in tier 3 and 2 in tier 4. So let's hear your argument for the 2 that you think belong in tier 4.
Okay. So yeah, we agreed on Dave Bing, Tiny Nate Archibald. I was debating because I had him in tier 3 too as well, but then I saw Louis Dampier and just saw his resume, and it kind of impressed me a lot more than Tiny's, because Louis Dampier, he's an ABA champion, a 7-time ABA All-Star, 4-time All-ABA. He basically is the all-time leader in points. He's the all-time leader in 3-point field goals for the ABA. Him and Daryl Carrier were a great backcourt duo. A great playmaker, could have that shooting touch. But he was like, some people said that he's more of a slasher, and Carrier was more of a shooter. shooter, but he was like a slasher, but he turned into a really good shooter. He has really great court vision. And he's a playmaker. He got a great shooting touch. First pro player, like kind of like a Steph Curry, back in the ABA when they had a 3-point line. He was like the first one to take a three on the fast break on a daily basis. He wasn't really much of a defender. He had 46 block shots in his final season. So I felt like his resume was more impressive than like Tiny's, just because Tiny he led the league in assists and points, in one season. And, he didn't really have much of a team around him, unfortunately, until he went to Boston and won the championship with Larry Bird and all. And, his speed, quickness, ball handling, penetrate to the lane. At 2-6 record in the playoffs. He only appeared in 6 games in the 70s. So I just didn't think that his resume was more impressive than Louis Dampier, and win shares was 67 compared to Louis Dampier's, whose win share was 74.1.
So, do you agree with that argument, Dime?
It's hard for me to go against it too hard because Louis Dampier, I only know the first couple of years of his career. You know what I mean? And I know that he's a sharp,
good point.
He's a sharp shooting guard. In terms of assists, now I don't think assists are always indicative of how good of a passer you are, but he's around 5 in the beginning of his career. Tiny is somebody who, as Justin said, led it in points and assists, which I think is extremely impressive, especially as a guard in the early 70s. Like that's very Oscar's a big guard. Like Tiny, he's Tiny Archibald. Like
he's Tiny Archibald, yeah.
Right.
Oscar Robertson's like 6'5", 235. Like he's posting dudes up. So I think that's impressive. I do think, though, if we want to talk ABA, Freddie Lewis should get a mention because he was the
he was good.
Indiana Pacers team.
He was good.
He was really good.
So, like, I don't know who's better between, like, Louis Dampier and Johnny Freeman and Freddie Lewis and Matt Calvin because I haven't seen their whole stories play out. I can tell you where they're viewed in the part that I'm at, but that's not really accurate for this episode. So, my only pushback with Tiny would be that I know more about him than I know about Louis at this stage.
I feel like everybody gets Tiny in the tier 3 because he's more of a popular player, and a lot of people know more about Tiny than they do with Louis Dampier because it's not really like a lot of film on him because most of his like best years was in the ABA. He did some NBA, but he wasn't really well known like what Tiny Archibald was because of the whole thing with him.
That is a good point. The way you're talking, it seems like we need to switch. Like Nate Archibald should be 4, and Tiny should be tier 4, and Louis Dampier should be tier 3.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking because I felt like I was debating back and forth between Dave Bing and Nate Archibald, who had like a better career between Dave Bing, and they're really close. They're really close in terms of like because they both can score the basketball and they both can assist the basketball too as well. So I felt like them two was going to be like a neck to neck, and that's why I got him in tier 4. And I just looked at Dampier and I was just like, he is like the all-time leader in points and assists and 3-point field goals in the ABA. Not even Dr. J is the all-time leader, even though we said that he's the greatest of all time. Not even Rick Barry. It's Louis Dampier. Like,
he played more years, I would assume Louis Dampier did than Doc and Rick Barry.
Possibly, because I think it's just because of the mojo. Because I forgot how long. When did Dr. J came in? Like 71?
Yeah, the year I'm doing right now, Doc's a rookie.
Yeah, so. And that's what I just felt like he just deserves like a good mention. And I've seen like some highlights of him, and he was just unbelievable with just the shoot and touch. And I just felt like he's on the all NBA, all ABA team that they put out. Like they put out like 30 to 40 players, and he's one of them.
Oh, he should be. If it's 30 to 40 players, he should absolutely be. You guys mentioned Dave Bing. Are some of these guys actually better than Dave Bing? Like Dave Bing is insanely talented. Like when you watch his film, he like jumps off the screen. Like he has some bad luck and a Detroit organization that made a lot of terrible trades.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
he was amazing. Like
he was amazing. He was an amazing player.
Yeah, I like Lenny Wilkins. I don't think he's more talented than Dave Bing. He probably had a better career though, but I don't think he's more talented, a better player than Dave Bing. But that's just my opinion, and I don't have all this footage to go off, and even people back then didn't. But Bing is just like
Bing was an animal.
Beast. He led the league in scoring as a point guard.
So with Dave Bing, do we see Dave Bing as a tier 3?
I could definitely hear the argument
over Lenny Wilkens.
I like Dave Bing's game more.
Let's hear your argument for Lenny Wilkens versus Dave Bing.
I mean, Lenny Wilkens.
Dave Bing was really good.
He was really good, but he didn't make an NBA Finals. Lenny Wilkens made the NBA Finals as a rookie, though, and he just never went back. But 9-time All-Star NBA, All-Star Game MVP.
I don't count All-Star. That's not.
You don't count All-Star? Okay, my apologies, but he was an assist leader. His win show totals is like 95.5. Excellent ball handling, ability to score. He had that leadership role right there. His overall record was the playoffs was 31-33 compared to Dave Bing, who had a 13-31 record. But we said that Detroit was a bad organization. He didn't really have much teammates until
he didn't have anything to work with, really.
Yeah. He had Bob Lanier.
He was like Jordan in the early '80s.
He didn't have Bob Lanier till year 5. You know what I mean? Like, my argument against that is, here's the thing. If we're talking who's a better traditional point guard, Lenny Wilkens is the better point guard. But if we're talking players, I'd rather have Bing. He could get his shot off on basically anyone at that time. Lenny Wilkens is much more of, as I said, like a true point guard. Dave Bing was the number 1 scoring option in his franchise. He was a franchise player. Lenny Wilkens came into a team that had just made it won the championship like 2 years before with Bob Pettit. And Lenny Wilkens played on stacked St. Louis teams, by the way. And they just don't get enough credit because they didn't make it to the finals after Pettit retired. But he had Zelmo Beatty, who won a championship in the ABA and won playoff MVP. He had Bill Bridges, who was a really consistent double-double machine throughout the 60s. And he also had Lou Hudson for a bit as well, who's an absolutely great scorer. And then Marvin Bagley's grandpa, Joe Caldwell, towards the end. So I think he just had a lot more talent to work with than Dave Bing. Dave Bing, I mean, these guys traded Happy Hairston in the middle of the season. Actually, no, they traded for Happy Hairston, I believe. They traded him to the Lakers for Bill Hewitt. Do you guys even know who Bill Hewitt is? Like, that was just a bad trade. They traded Dave DeBusschere for Walt Bellamy. Like, they made some bad deals, and Dave Bing was, suffered because of it, winning-wise.
I mean, like I said, I don't have a problem if y'all have Dave Bing in the tier 3. I really do not have a problem with it. It's just like back and forth with Tiny, Lenny, and Dave, who's going to be in that tier 3 for it. I just thought Lenny just had like a better career, but you just said that Dave's probably the better individual player in terms of talent that could score the basketball a lot more than Lenny, because Lenny was a traditional point guard, and I thought the list was based on point guards that's very traditional.
It is, but
unless we're doing a combo guard for the 60s and 70s, then Dave Bing definitely gets higher.
That's the thing. Dave Bing, I don't see Dave Bing listed on sites as a combo guard like other people are. I think he was, but I think that because of the construction of the teams in Detroit, he was forced into that role of being that scorer. He was a point guard to me that I think in the 60s and 70s we are blurring those lines. I do agree with Dime. We are blurring.
They didn't have the position. I've never heard the term point guard yet. I don't know when.
Yeah.
I'll be the first to tell you when it does come.
Yeah. You're right. I mean, I'm thinking based on the description of what he was able to do on the floor, Dave Bing. I have Bob Cousy, Louis Dampier, and Dave Bing in tier 3.
I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with it.
Pros? Okay.
I can't wait after this to ask Dr. Hawk and Jason who the best ABA point guard was now.
Yeah, I'm so curious what they're going to say. So for tier 4, I have Nate Archibald.
Yes.
Feels weird that he's in tier 4, but I get the argument.
You guys pushed him out. I was pro Tiny.
I would be too, but
he's more iconic than Dave Bing, though. That's the thing, right? Like, he led the league in scoring and assists. Should we put Tiny over Bing? That's the thing. Like, because Bing doesn't have playoff success either.
Hey, here's the question though. Has Tiny Archibald ever ran for mayor? Because
We're on
Dave
tier
Bing
4.
won.
We're on tier 4.
Okay, you
Dave
locked it down.
Bing,
That's fine.
Dave Bing is in tier 3. We're on tier 4. This is who we got. Matt Calvin, Archibald, Lenny Wilkins.
That would probably be the 3.
Plus JoJo, I think it should be the 4.
Now, this is what I wanted to ask, because you had a different list for tier 4. So I'm not against. I'm thinking of doing like maybe an honorable mention. Like Liz for this era. We can do an honorable mention for anybody that we feel strongly that we didn't mention. We can do an honorable mention thing, and we can have JoJo White on that list. So let's hear your argument for the one person, because we have Nate Archibald, Matt Calvin, Lenny Wilkins. Who is the one person that belongs in tier 4 for you for the 60s and 70s?
So I never thought about JoJo White, and that was great that JoJo White gets mentioned. I said Jimmy Jones because he's the best ABA player to never won an ABA title. His shooting percentage was 51% his whole career, and that's better than anyone in ABA history. All-around guard, excellent shooter, nice pull-up J, took like the very smart shots, good shots, because he shots a high percentage shooting from the field, like I said, 51%, 6'5". He's kind of like Oscar just a little bit though, because he was an excellent passer, excellent scorer, excellent rebounder, capable of having big scoring nights, like he had a career high of 48 points. He's a great one-on-one player. Him and Steve Snapper Jones was a great backcourt in Memphis for the ABA. Average 18.8 points per game in the playoffs, 4.2 assists, 4.6 rebounds, 46 and 43 in the playoffs. He also is a 3-time All-ABA, 14.5 points per game as a point guard, 4.2 assists as a point guard, 3.7 rebounds as a point guard, win share as a point guard, 69.5. And I felt like he's like one of the top 10 greatest ABA players of all time that everybody mentions is Jimmy Jones.
Dime, what are your opinions on that?
Jimmy Jones is a beast. The only thing I'll say about him is that he had like an insane season the second year of his ABA career. I think it was 68, 69. He was like insane.
Insane.
Right? But then the next season, from what I remember, and Jason told me this, he was made to play through a lot of injuries in 1970. If you see his numbers dropped, that's not really because he just got worse, but he really had to fight through a lot of injuries. As Justin mentioned, he was on the Memphis Pros with Steve Snapper Jones. And then he goes to the Utah Stars, which is crazy. That season I'm on, they just acquired him. That's crazy to me that they got Jimmy Jones. That's just stacked. But my argument with JoJo is that, he comes into the Celtics, obviously post KC and Sam Jones, and they're looking for someone to score and to help Havlicek out. And that first season was rough because it was the first season after Bill Russell had retired. But then the second season when Cowens came along, they got a lot better and they slowly progressed into being 2-time champions. And JoJo White is one of the only point guards in NBA history with a finals MVP under his belt. And I think that's awesome that he's able to do that. He's got a great jump shot.
Yeah.
But as I said, right, I've only done 2 full seasons of JoJo's career. I'm on the 3rd one, and he's playing great right now. The Celtics are doing great. I think they're going to have a really good record this season that I'm doing, and I think they ended up having a great record. But that would be my argument against that. I haven't seen enough of both players to like say it with my chest, like who I think is better. But the reason I'm going to go with JoJo is because he won a Finals MVP for the Boston Celtics, 2 championships as a starting point guard. And Jimmy Jones just had those injuries starting with that 1969-70 season. And he just wasn't quite the same as he was with the New Orleans Buccaneers early on in his career. But I'm hoping that he ended up having a great career anyway.
So
good points.
I think those are good points. I think for tier 4, we're going to add JoJo White for tier 4. So these are our tiers, our consolidated tiers. Oscar Robertson is tier 1. Tier 2 is Jerry West and Walt Frazier. Tier 3 is Bob Cousy, Dave Bing, and Louis Dampier. I always go back and forth between James. I always have problems. And then tier 4, Nate Archibald, Matt Calvin, Lenny Wilkins, and JoJo White. So those are our tiers for the 60s and 70s. Is there a player that you want to call out as special mention that did not make one of the tiers?
A player that I want to give. There's two players I want to shout out to as well. One, I want to give a shout out to Brian Taylor, two-time ABA champion, three-time All ABA defensive, All ABA team, first team rookie, ABA steals leader. I want to give him a shout out, and also want to give a shout out to what was the other player that I was? Oh, Guy Rogers.
I was considering him, but I just thought there was better players. Guy Rogers, I was considering because he's one of the better point guards.
Exactly, and I was considering him too, but then I was looking at the list. I was just like, he's going to be honorable mention right there, but he's definitely should be mentioned. He was an unbelievable player.
Do you have anybody that you want to mention, Dan?
Yeah, for sure. I already mentioned Norm Van Leer, but Freddie Lewis.
Yes.
Didn't get the run in Cincinnati because of Oscar. Goes to the ABA and immediately becomes.
What was the name again? I'm sorry.
Freddie Lewis, the conductor.
Oh yeah, Freddie Lewis. Okay.
Freddie Lewis
on the Pacers teams. You know, if you have 2K, you can play with him on the all-time Pacers team. And the Indiana Pacers, like they are like the golden standard of the ABA to me. Like Freddie Lewis, Roger Brown, Mel Daniels, Bob Nettles, a stacked team, and he was the conductor of that. And so I have to give him a lot of props. Donnie Freeman, I think, is another one, a really good scorer, first point guard. He was the man for the Miami Floridians, and he was traded to I think it was Dallas. Yeah, the Chaparrals for what's his name, Ron Boone and Glenn Coombs, which got the Utah Stars to win that championship in 1971. So I think Donnie Freeman and Freddie Lewis are two ABA names that absolutely deserve some mention. And then as far as NBA. Phil Chenier from the Washington Bullets. I think he's
nice
point guard.
Yeah, nice,
good. And I got one more. Sorry, he wouldn't make the list to me, but a really good player is Archie Shake and Bake Clark, one of the first guys that really popularized the crossover at that time, and he obviously played for the Lakers and was in the centerpiece of the Wilt trade. And I thought he was great in Philadelphia, and now he's replacing Monroe in Baltimore.
This was so much fun. I have really had a good time. So we have our list, and we have our honorable mention. When it's posted to YouTube, we'll have in the comments what our tiered list is, and we'll also have this up on hoopspaces.com. We'll have our list for top point guards. The next, you can move on to the next episode, and we'll be going through the 80s and 90s.
Yes.
So, join us as we go through this journey. We're going to be looking at the top players for every position. And Dime, he doesn't know this yet, but he's joining us to review the 60s and 70s for each position. Because he's, this is his thing. So, when we get to the shooting guard, he'll be there. And we'll have the same argument about the combo guards were really the thing. Back then, there was just the guard role, but we'll fight through it. And then I'm thinking I'm gonna move to centers after that, because that's gonna be a tough one. Centers are gonna be tough. I'm not looking forward to the centers. I am not looking forward to the centers, but we will have to do it. So I want to thank everyone for watching, listening. Thank Justin and Diane for joining me on this journey. And peace out, and definitely hit play on the next episode. Thank you. And Liberty, like WNBA finals is going on. By the time this publishes, we may be over, but Liberty forever. Peace, everyone.